From the Times and Sunday Times, this is the story. It's October 2023. Police officers are patrolling the east of Leeds when they spot someone in a balaclava. It's autumn and a bit cold, but this is suspicious. The figure starts to run before they duck into a shop and remove the disguise, only to be turfed out immediately, because shop staff recognise him. In fact, he's already been banned. 18-year-old Solomon Samvari is arrested. Police find roughly £400 of crack cocaine and heroin on him, and a phone which they will later tell the court shows clear evidence of drug dealing. He admits supplying Class A drugs and is sent to a young offenders institution. Fast forward just over a year to January 2025, and once again,
there was an arrest of someone called Solomon Samvari.
Again on drug-related charges. And this time, police officers 25 miles away in York paid attention. They'd recently launched Operation Titan, a force-wide effort to tackle county lines drug dealing. And Samvari had already caught their eye.
The belief was that he was, in the early days, the person in charge of the Sam line.
Sam was then one of 20 county lines running into the city, selling crack cocaine and heroin via text message.
It was one of the first lines, along with the Diego line, that brought with it the most amount of risk, and was probably one of the main reasons that Titan was formed. Because early on it was identified that Sam and Diego were warring groups in West Yorkshire. They were both trying to establish themselves in York, and with that it brought risk.
Both groups were getting young people from the neighbouring county to run drugs into York, passing the risk of violence and arrest onto them, while the line holders stayed at home. In the weeks after Solomon Samvari was arrested, however, the Sam line went completely silent. There were suddenly no offers of drugs for sale. For officers on the front line of this problem, like Mike Brocken, hope starts to creep in. Until roughly a month later, when the Sam line started sending out messages once again. A user texted,
"You still on?"
The reply,
"Active."
Samvari was in custody. Someone else had to be holding the line.
Back on both. 24/7. Fast drops. On. Best of both. 2 for 15, 4 for 30.
Offering deals, trying to establish themselves in the city. Police began to investigate. What they found would shock them. It wouldn't just reveal how much these lines rely on children to deliver drugs. It would suggest children were taking control. I'm David Collins, the Northern editor at the Sunday Times. Last year, North Yorkshire Police gave me unprecedented access into their attempts to tackle county lines. This is the story of how York fought back and the challenges still ahead. The story today, On the Line. Episode 3, The Loophole. In the first few months of 2025, police watched as the Sam line slowly built up its business. sending bulk text messages to drug users in York.
So our numbers down at the bottom indicates over a weekly period how many bulk message events have been recorded from the line.
Sergeant Mike Brocken is the head of Operation Sentry, the team tasked with disrupting organised crime in North Yorkshire. He's walking me through a spreadsheet of data.
For instance, in the week of the 14th of July, the SAM line have sent out 403 bulk messages. So either 403 different customers or a number of customers over the week in total have received 403 messages. So ultimately there have been that many numbers of offer to supply Class A drugs.
A huge increase from the 25 messages sent to users in a similar week 5 months earlier.
What we're seeing there is that the customer base that the line has is ever growing. So in your community of drug users in your city, they might say, for instance, the SAM line product is particularly good at the minute, or it's particularly cheap, or it might be the only line that's active at the minute. So then they're like, oh, well, can you send them my number so then I can know when they're operating again? That also might be he's been able to increase the frequency at which he's been able to offer to supply as well, shift more commodity over a shorter period of time, so therefore he can increase his profits.
And what sort of profits are we talking? So if we've got 403 messages going out in July, for example, and he's offering deals like 2 for 15 quid.
So if each of those offers to supply was taken up, we're looking in the region of £6,000.
And how large is that compared to other kind of lines?
Particularly looking at their data, that looks like a very busy week for them, and that would be a very healthy amount for 1 week. So you wouldn't probably normally see those kind of levels. It would probably be about half that, I would have thought, for your well-established lines, and then your new up-and-coming lines, you might be starting at maybe even a quarter of that.
Replicate the SAM line's busy week and it's more than £300,000 a year. Make no mistake, this is big business. Voice notes from other cases reveal one person offering to sell control of a county line for tens of thousands of pounds. And while a dealer might start out small, potentially working on their own,
as he starts to establish himself as a line in York, he gets to a point where he can take maybe more of a backseat role, and that's when the recruitment of the children starts, which then can almost exponentially increase his ability to meet demand because he's got more people working for him.
As children are recruited, there is a whole new layer of concern for police. And another team, 2 floors below Mike's office, become involved. A team who come at the problem of county lines from a completely different angle.
We get a very different reaction with the kids to, say, for instance, response going out in uniform. They just clam up, don't they, and they won't speak to them. But we don't.
Kids are quite violent, or they hate the police. But we sometimes see a different side to the kids because we're not coming in when they've done something wrong.
Detective Sergeant Amy Foster and Police Constable Phil Hallam are part of the child exploitation team. They work alongside social care, health and education to support children identified as being at risk of criminal or sexual exploitation, which includes being involved in county lines. Because children can be threatened into running drugs or violently robbed by other gangs.
They're seen as, and that's why they're used, because they're seen as disposable assets. They can just be easily replaced. They're human beings at the end of the day, vulnerable at that, so for us it's really sad because the damage is already done, and some of the violence and the threats and coercion that they've been victim to, that'll live with them forever.
The child exploitation team is led by Detective Inspector Cheryl Quinn.
And I think the highs for me are when these guys have been working with a child for months and months and we finally get a breakthrough, or the child will finally disclose after months of I'm not being exploited, I don't know what you're talking about, why is everybody concerned? And then the penny drops.
On the wall of a busy hub where calls are coming in from different services, there's a list of the operations Cheryl's team has run.
Some of them from last year, so you'll see I had up icicle, up snow, they were like Christmas themed. Then I moved through the year.
I was going to say, so we're looking at a board right now in the operations hub. And we've got Operation Reindeer, we've got Operation Sledge, Operation Seal, Operation Snow.
They're my Christmassy ones.
I'm guessing they were over, November, December time,
yes. Seal was in relation to the coast. That's why that was there.
Makes sense, yeah. But it's Operation Envy which started to unpick the newly restarted Sam line. It was created to support a 14-year-old boy the team had been working with for a couple of years. We're going to call him Usain. And police first met him by chance.
It's kind of by accident, wasn't it?
Yeah. So that child was involved in a road traffic collision.
Yeah.
Knocked over by a bus, I think, and then it quite quickly became apparent that he had no parent and nobody to kind of vouch for him.
Police had attended a regular call-out, reports of a boy clipped by a bus, and they were looking to get his details.
That cop was trying to chase it up and go, well, I need to speak to him and make sure he wants to make a complaint. Blah, blah, blah. Just like very basic stuff. But it became apparent, actually, well, no one knows who this child is.
He didn't attend school, had no documentation, wasn't related to the person he was living with.
So we asked the person they were living with and the child to come here, and we put the child into police protection.
Police discovered Usain had come to the UK with his mother when he was 12. They'd arrived at Gatwick as though they were simply coming on holiday, but she'd returned home alone, and he had been left with a family friend.
And then, his mum left, and then it moved up to York.
In York, however, those Usain was living with had associations with drug dealing. There were clear risks he'd be swept up into that world.
And obviously, with regards to him, he's so vulnerable and he's got nothing else in his life. So why wouldn't he want to be part of a family that is going to put their arms around him and take care of him?
He'd never been fully integrated into a normal life here. He'd always been kept quiet and not going to school or integrating with wider society.
Entirely alone, they worried he'd do anything to help those who had offered him friendship, support, money to live on. Officers wanted Usain to share details of his life so they could help him avoid criminal exploitation. Amy describes meeting Usain when he came into the police station after an incident in his care home, surrounded by support workers.
And he just looked really lost. I felt really sorry for him. But he didn't give anything away. Closed book. Which is really difficult because obviously when you're trying to work with a kid like that and you want to get the information from them to help them, but they can't see that, you just feel like you're just going around in circles. Because again, they don't see themselves as victims, so how are you going to be able to help them in any way, shape or form anyway?
Over time, the team watched as Usain began to be involved in petty criminality.
With bike thefts and things like that coming to police attention, and the concern there was, is this something he's doing because he wants to do this, or is he being told to do it, or is he being influenced to do it?
He wasn't saying much, he wasn't disclosing, but the intelligence was coming in that he was travelling by taxi, that he was potentially involving other young people in his friends group.
All signs Usain may have become wrapped up in a drug gang.
We started doing some work around the child and we had a little bit of a breakthrough in that he made a very panicked disclosure to his youth justice officer, basically saying he was involved in a county line.
We became aware one day that he was potentially in debt for a lot of money to a particular person, as he potentially lost a considerable amount of drugs that day.
He had brought an amount of drugs to York and he'd seen a police officer and panicked and tried to hide the drugs under a bush. And then when he came back, the drugs had disappeared.
Around £1,000 worth of drugs gone.
So he now owes his recruiter, his exploiter, his perpetrator, the amount that those drugs were worth to him. And he is now in debt, and they're going to seek to recuperate that debt.
And I think he panicked. So obviously we became aware of this information, and one of our team went straight out to try and speak to him, obviously quite close because of the concern of the repercussions. And although it wasn't completely closed off, he was still very, very reluctant to pass us information.
It's common for drug runners to be more afraid of speaking to the police than the consequences of breaking the law. The threat of debt, of violence, the risk of being termed a grass can all stop young people from sharing information. The York team met to discuss how they could support Usain.
The weekend passed and The Monday came, completely closed off, didn't want to speak to us. So in that time, we believe that the exploiter had managed to get back in, and he was telling us that he then had a plan to repay the debt and it was all fine. As you can imagine, we were extremely worried, because what does that look like? What does he have to do to pay that debt back?
Usain had been working for the Sam Line, the very drugs operation which had been building up its business in York, offering deals to entice new customers. And knowing a 14-year-old was in this situation, North Yorkshire Police prioritised their investigation. It revealed 5 more teenagers, 3 other boys and 2 girls also connected to the same county line. Cheryl Quinn describes it as a nightmare.
Because you've got all these kids that we're trying to manage and safeguard and stop having contact. But when you speak to them, they say that we're not being exploited because they're making money. They're not in school, they're not in education, but he's putting 250 quid in their pocket a week.
Is that how much they earn?
Roughly,
250 a week?
Roughly. So they don't feel like they're being exploited, they actually feel like they're being looked after because, well, my mum only gave me a tenner.
While Cheryl's team worked to support the children, upstairs, Mike Brocken's Operation Sentry team prioritised the work to trace the line holder. The person in charge, the one asking these children to do this work. They arrested a suspect. And here is where for the first time I am shocked. Because he was just 17, another child. Not just suspected of dealing or running drugs, but accused of holding the line, arranging children only a few years younger to carry out that work. I've never heard of anything like that, and I'm just letting it sink in when Cheryl stops me.
I know you think that up envy is unusual, don't you? Because
Do you not think it is?
I know, because I've got another one in Harrogate that's got
A kid?
yeah.
How old?
16.
16?
Holding a line, yeah.
16 holding the line?
Yeah. We believe so. We've got information that he's running the whole of this line, running from Wakefield into Harrogate. And
Right.
he's one of ours that we're supposed to be trying to work with for exploitation.
In fact, if we go through Cheryl's list of operations,
So up Envy, up Sledge was a child holding a line. Up Seal was a child holding a line. Up Snow. Yeah. So out of that list, 4. At
All
least
out
4.
of 13?
Yeah.
4 children suspected of running entire drugs networks themselves. In the case of the Sam Line, Mike Brocken's team made the arrest.
From speaking to colleagues around the country, it is something they are now seeing more and more often.
And he thinks there's a reason.
As a child, they can very quickly say, I've been exploited. Even if they haven't, they can still try and use that as a defence.
Because here we enter a legal quagmire. British law aims to protect those who've been exploited by criminals. Its protections for children are particularly strong. Yet Mike believes the law itself is encouraging gangs to recruit children into more senior positions in their drug networks. The reason 16 and 17-year-olds are being found holding the line.
Up Sledge was a child holding a line. Up Seal was a child holding a line. Up Snow. Yeah. So out of that list, 4.
In York, police believe an increasing number of those in charge of County Line's drugs operations are children. And when that happens, the job of frontline officers like Sergeant Mike Brocken become even more complex.
At the minute, rightly or wrongly, every child should automatically be first off considered, are they a victim of exploitation?
Mike is talking about the Modern Slavery Act, which, when it was first introduced in 2015, gave first responders like the police a duty to notify the Home Office of any suspected victim of exploitation. And to understand why this can be a roadblock to police trying to tackle county lines, we first have to explain how it works. We're at the Crown Prosecution Service offices in Sheffield. It's a very rainy day. The offices are on a hilly street, of course, because it's Sheffield, it's got to be hilly. To help, we've come to the home of the lawyers who try and secure convictions for County Lines dealers.
Hello.
Hiya. It's David. Oh, how are you? Okay.
Oh yeah, great. Sign in here.
District Crown Prosecutor Rachel Baldwin walks us through a maze of corridors. She explains the Modern Slavery Act covers anyone threatened or deceived into providing a service, an exploitation at the heart of how county lines operate.
The whole setup of a county lines gang is that people are being directed to behave in a certain way. They use people's need to belong. They expose people in society that can be quite vulnerable, that don't always have a support network, and they groom them into their way of working, in the sense of they'll give them money, shoes, nice things to have, and these can be people that have never really had very much and don't really have anyone, and all of a sudden they offer them a sense of belonging.
Just think about how 14-year-old Usain found himself involved in a county lines drug gang. When the police come across anyone who could have been exploited this way, they have to fill out a form to make a referral into the National Referral Mechanism, or NRM.
If it's an adult, there has to be consent to go into that mechanism. Whereas a child, there doesn't need to be consent. So if they have concerns about a child, they'll simply make the referral.
And that could be from the child suggesting they've been exploited, or even a suspicion that they have been exploited.
A suspicion, because I think the truth is that there's quite a few people that don't know they're being exploited. So it really requires the professionals that are involved in that case to think this is someone that's a potential victim. They don't have to be certain at that point, it's potential.
That referral goes to a specialised team at the Home Office.
They'll make what's called a reasonable grounds decision. That decision is on the basis of I suspect but I cannot prove.
Before they collect more information and come to a final, conclusive grounds decision. If positive, the Home Office believes, on the balance of probabilities, that person was a victim of modern slavery. They're given support from accommodation to understanding the benefit system. But with it, anyone suspected of committing a crime can also run what's known as a Section 45 defence, using the collection of evidence to argue they are not guilty because their actions were a consequence of exploitation. The CPS can even decide at this point it would not be in the public interest to prosecute them. And for children, this argument is even easier.
We have a 4-stage test when we're deciding whether someone should be prosecuted that's potentially a victim of modern slavery. Stage 3 of that test is there clear evidence of a statutory defence under Section 45? For an adult, that requirement is the person that commits the offence is compelled to do so. For a child, there's no requirement of compulsion. And that's quite a big distinction.
So whether they were compelled or not, they can still have the defence.
Yeah. And that is a really big distinction, because that's where quite a lot of the adult Section 45 cases will fail. It's all about agency over your own actions. And can you make a choice to do something different? And I think the children not having the requirement to be compelled shows the difference in thinking, and the law recognising that people under 18 are still children and developing the way that they think.
We know 2 of the teenagers arrested by North Yorkshire Police on suspicion of operating a drugs line have already received a positive conclusive grounds decision, indicating they are a victim of exploitation. For Mike Brocken, who leads a team responsible for keeping County Lines gangs out of his community, that can be frustrating.
It's a big frustration, and I think the whole NRM mechanism and how it's been used is not necessarily how it was intended when it was brought into legislation. There are clearly children involved in drug supply that have indeed been exploited to be involved in drug supply. But when you have an individual who has been involved in drug supply for a number of years, and then they're on the cusp of adulthood and have the ability to make those decisions themselves, as in they're far less impressionable, it's more difficult to kind of go, well, you may well have been exploited at the start when you were 12, 13 to become involved in this world, but you've had so much opportunity and intervention from support services, whether that be the police, social care, or your other drug intervention work. You are still now choosing to go down this route. It's then really difficult to still see those people as victims when actually they've made a choice to continue to supply drugs. They're not being exploited. They are now the exploiters.
Mike believes gangs are using the protections afforded by the Modern Slavery Act to recruit children higher up in the operation, fueling this growing number of teenagers running lines.
Your organised crime group effectively see them as it's almost a bit of a win-win. Like, we can say to them, you run our business. Even if you get arrested and charged, there's every chance that you may get off with it because, well, you're a child.
In 2023, a review by the Crown Prosecution Service Inspectorate basically agreed, saying the Section 45 defence
can be open to abuse by unscrupulous individuals and criminal gangs who exploit the existence of the defence to assist them in recruiting and coercing others to commit offences on their behalf.
This warning came after Home Office referrals increased by 60% between 2020 and 2022, a rise largely driven by County Lines activity. In fact, the protection of the Modern Slavery Act was so widely used by drug runners, it became known as the County Lines defence.
So it was a tactic that was used. It was initially effective. We didn't always deal with these things in the best way possible. We might stop a case that we certainly wouldn't stop now, or the decision wouldn't be back in time, so the trial would have to be adjourned. We'd have to consider whether to keep someone in custody. So that was quite an effective tactic for them at that point.
Rachel argues, however, that after 2023, the guidance was reviewed and improvements made.
We got our house in order. All our guidance is now in one place. All our lawyers have regular training. So we are doing, in my view, quite well. So it's not a get out of jail free card anymore.
Not a get out of jail free card anymore. Rachel says they've got much better at testing the evidence of exploitation, allowing them to continue with prosecutions.
So at the point we've decided to prosecute, we're confident that we've got material that will rebut what they say. So, for example, someone might say, not necessarily in a child county lines, think more a cannabis growth for adults. They might say, I couldn't get out, I was locked in. Well, the police will have been through their phones. We've had one where someone had pictures themselves in a casino. Well, you've been out. But they've told the SCA
they're saying they were captive. They
Absolutely.
literally couldn't leave the premises.
We've had another case where someone said that they've been forced to do this, but the police have requested their bank accounts. There's thousands of pounds going into their account. Well, you're far less to be a victim of being compelled if you're being paid. So we then present our case with all that evidence that rebuts that defence, which is why things like keys, phones, laptops, the investigation is so important, because we have to disprove what they're saying, but that's not a hurdle that we can't get over.
So you don't think the NRM mechanism, it doesn't make it an insurmountable
Absolutely not.
thing in court? You're still able to prosecute?
And we do. I think it's really important that the real victims of trafficking and modern day slavery are protected. But it's also really important that people that aren't are prosecuted. And it's a really difficult balance to find, but that's why we have our policies, our processes, our guidance, to make sure that we get that right.
But whether things are now right is still up for debate. Rachel tells me a story which she thinks demonstrates the system working. A 17-year-old in Humberside was accused of running a County Lines drug operation. He was given a positive conclusive grounds decision by the Home Office, believed to be being exploited and not prosecuted. But after being let off, he was caught again, running a different county line. And then he raised the same defence.
A new referral was made. I believe got a second conclusive grounds decision. One of the lawyers in the team followed our process, did their review and said, no, I'm still going to prosecute this person. The facts of that case suggested that basically he had been a victim of slavery at some point, but now he had agency over his own decision making, so he was choosing to continue to be involved in that enterprise. So he'd been offered support of support agencies following his previous conclusive grounds decision, and he decided not to step away and to accept that help. He'd stayed within it and obviously worked his way a little bit up the hierarchy. So we were able to say in our decision making, no, you were a victim of trafficking, but now there's no longer a nexus to your offending.
When the prosecution continued, Rachel says the 17-year-old pled guilty. She sees this as getting the balance right, protecting children who could have been exploited while prosecuting where necessary. But what's incredible about this is that I've heard almost exactly the same story from Sergeant Mike Brocken, but he gives it as an example of system failure.
Maybe it's because I've been doing the job for 20 years and this was never a thing when I first started, and a child committed an offence. You just go, well, you've committed the offence, it's very black and white, you get in charge, you go into court, and then it's up to the courts to decide. And don't get me wrong, the level of safeguarding that is now in place is the right place. I personally feel like it's being abused.
The story Mike tells is that a 14-year-old boy was stabbed in York, the victim of warring drug lines. So Mike's team quickly tracked down the line holders and arrested an adult and a teenager.
Both of those were charged. The adult was remanded to prison and is still pending trial. The child was released by the courts.
Believed to have been exploited, the child was bailed and given support to get him away from the gang. Only a month or so later, he too was rearrested.
Identified as a line holder for a county line running, and he was operating on his own.
That case is still making its way through the courts. But the teenager was bailed for a second time with another positive conclusive grounds decision. For Mike, this is not getting the balance right, but giving dealers the opportunity to reoffend.
He has had so much involvement at that point of being in court for the first one with all his support services, but despite all of that wraparound care that was put in place for him, he has then continued to go back to his old ways. He is now claiming that he's been exploited by somebody else who he doesn't know. He doesn't know their name, but he knows kind of roughly what they look like. And that's all he has to say. Maybe I'm naive, but to me, he does not present or sound like someone who has been exploited. He is using it as a loophole.
We can't say that someone who holds and operates a county line can't still feel pressure from figures higher up the chain, can't be exploited. All drug organisations are a hierarchy. Anyone working in them can be subject to violence and threats. But at the very least, the justice system is struggling to deal with these cases quickly. I've sat in court and watched one case for several defendants accused of running a county line be delayed for 14 months simply because of a hold-up in distributing paperwork from a positive conclusive grounds decision.
I think the thing is, the legislation is written to protect victims. It's written for all the right intents and purposes. You can't dictate everything that you do by, could someone get round this? People are clever. No matter what technology comes in, there's a way around it. No matter what barriers you try and put in, people find another way. So I don't think you can blame the legislation. And if it was written a different way, we wouldn't have this. We might have a different problem, but I think we'd have some problem. And I think it's about us sticking to our safeguards and applying them that will keep this under control.
But as Mike points out, the very existence of the Modern Slavery Act and the exploitation defence it offers means criminals can tell children they have a unique opportunity to climb the chain, run their businesses, and face no consequences. Whether this is true or just fake advertising, York shows us this law might in fact be luring more children than ever into more senior positions. Running county lines. I've spent 3 episodes talking to you about the kids involved in county lines. But it's their experiences that can give us a real insight into what exploitation and coercion actually look like. Tomorrow I'm going to be handing over to my colleague, Times crime editor David Wood.
Can you remember the first time somebody approached you to maybe try to entice you to do something?
Who met one of the children caught up in county lines.
I come out of the shop and he says, yo, he came to me, he's talking to me about drugs and stuff and telling me if I go to certain places, I can get a couple bills, like £300 to £400.
That's next time on The Story. I'm Sunday Times Northern editor David Collins. This episode was produced by Kate Lamble. The executive producer was Dan Box. Sound design was by Dave Creasy and theme composition was by Mao Lassetto. If you have any questions or comments, drop us a line to thestory@thetimes.com or you can leave us a comment on Spotify. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.